Folks, good afternoon. Welcome to Maverick Baking and welcome to another installment of Desserts of the World. Today we are traveling to Central America. We're talking about Mexico. A big country split into so many different cultures, cuisines, traditions, and heritage, but one that enchants people all over this planet with its ingredients and its recipes. While many of us immediately jump to bold flavors, we jump to mole, we jump to chilies, we jump to expertly blended spices used with meat, with beans, with corn. We think of all of the wonderful ways a meal can be formed from the humble tortilla. And probably most of all, we think of savory food. But Mexico is no stranger to desserts, and delicious ones at that. It's a cuisine often mimicked and often very badly, but one that I hope to do some justice to today. Help. The dessert we are making, tasting, and loving in today's installment is the Tres Leches Cake. Translating literally to 3 milks cake, this is one that doesn't look particularly wow, if I'm being honest, as many fantastic desserts also don't. It's something that looks very simple, very humble, but I swear will have people from all walks of life sinking their forks into for at least one more taste. The Tres Leches cake you will see before you today is one that is soft, fluffy, and so beautifully milky. It's a cake that has no added fat to the sponge recipe. There's no oil, there's no butter, and we're using nothing more than the humble egg for leavening and raising purposes. This cake is simple, it's easy, but when you add that combination of milk and condensed milk, fluffy whipped cream, a little hint of vanilla, and just that little dusting of cinnamon on top, you will understand why this cake deserves every bit of patience that you need for it. While it will be a fairly quick bake in the oven, you'll make over half a litre of a gorgeous milk to soak this cake in before leaving it in the fridge to soak up and just bathe in all of those beautiful, simple flavors before adding that cream on top and eating 3 slices at a time. It seems to be a gorgeous contrast to the stereotypical ideas of Mexican cuisine that we see from foreign parts of the world. And it's one that's beautifully customizable. You could add fresh fruit, you could add other flavorings, other spices, you could add chocolate, you could decorate this however you like, make it as big or as small as you like. And it's one I will be adding to my regular kitchen repertoire because I love it so much. But enough description, enough explanation. Let me show you how I made this Tres Leches cake.
Our recipe begins with our raising agents. Now, because we're not going to be using any baking powder or bicarbonate of soda in this recipe, our raising agents, our fat, and a lot of the kind of flavour and colour will be provided just by some eggs. Very humble little things doing a lot of work in this recipe. They deserve a raise. In total, we're going to be using 5, splitting the whites and the yolks into separate bowls. And you're just basically going to want to let out all of the week's stress, violence, and aggression on these with a manual or an electric whisk until both are fluffy, voluminous, and opaque. As you can see, holding soft peaks there. Now that the whites are all whipped up and looking whiter than ever, you can do the same with the yolks, adding just a little bit of sugar to sweeten our cake. We don't want to add too much. At this point, you can also add vanilla or cinnamon, any flavors you like. We don't want to add too much sugar here because we're going to be soaking the cake later on, just enough to provide good color and nice balance to the flavor. Once we have lovely fluffy whites and lovely fluffy yolks, you can add the lovely fluffy whites to the lovely fluffy yolks to make a combination of lovely fluffy whites and lovely fluffy yolks. 10 out of 10 writing from me there. You can kind of beat it in pretty aggressively to begin with, but as you're adding kind of the last 2/3 of those lovely fluffy whites to the lovely fluffy yolks, you're going to want to mix it in just gently so as not to knock out too much of that air, to which you're going to then sift in your flour, just plain flour, nothing fancy. As I said, no raising agents either. And if you haven't already added a pinch of salt, now is a good time to do so. Look out your cake tin. Butter it up just a little bit and add a bit of greaseproof paper to make your life easier once the cake is out of the oven. And just pour all of that lovely cake mix in. Bake it until it is risen and golden and looking full of beautiful little air bubbles. You're going to want to cool the cake for 10 to 15 minutes at most. And meanwhile, we're just going to stir together the lovely, dose of the tres leches that we're going to be adding to the cake. Traditionally, this should apparently be evaporated milk and condensed milk. Here in Italy, I could not find evaporated milk to save my life, so we are doing it just with regular whole cow's milk and a full tin of condensed milk, which will help add sweetness and texture. Just whisk those up, and with your cake, just kind of not hot, but also not cold, you're just going to want to stab it particularly violently with either kind of a small knife or a chopstick or some kind of implement before absolutely drenching it, drowning it, just soaking it in the 2 of the 3 milks there. It will look absurd. It will look ruined. It will look completely and utterly just unfathomable in its appearance, but you will not believe how quickly that cake will soak up all of that liquid. Then you're just going to want to pop it in the fridge and forget about it for at least 2 hours. And once the cake has cooled, chilled, soaked up all of those beautiful textures and flavors, you can prepare the topping. For this, I just use some standard double or whipping cream, a pinch of salt, and about a rounded tablespoon of icing sugar. You could also add vanilla here if you like, or lemon zest, and I just whipped up the cream before piping it straight onto that beautiful, simple soaked sponge. Now you can decorate this however you like. You can pipe it, you can spread it, you could dust cocoa over. I dusted over some cinnamon just for a bit of a contrast in colour and texture, and that's it. A super simple, classic and much beloved Mexican Tres Leches cake. This is moist, it's refreshing, it's satisfying yet light at the same time. It's rich but also not too sweet. It's an absolute winner in my book. I adore this and I hope you guys do too.